Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening everybody. Welcome back to my YouTube channel and to another installment in the Sydney Railroad build. If you're watching last week, you'll have seen me frame in the upper level benchwork along the top edge of the plan. But now that I have the final dimensions for the area under the stairs, now it's time to move back to the other side of the room and work on the harbour area. So without further ado, let's just head out to the workshop and get busy.
Well, over the weekend I received the final numbers for the area under the stairs. And it's a good job I waited because one of the dimensions is actually 5 inches smaller than I was promised by the builder. That's always the way. It wasn't surprising at all. I wasn't going to take any chances. I insisted that I got actual numbers from putting a tape on the real stairs instead of just the drawings. Anyway, this is the frame that goes under the stairs. There's still a curve to come in this corner, which is why those pieces are run long. I don't know how much too long they are yet. The same with this tail in this corner. It runs long. There's a curve there. But I'll build those in situ because I still have to build the end of the previous frame. And I've got to work out where the wiring holes go in that. So let me work that out and I'll be right back. Well, this frame is now installed. I built a couple more legs to go at this end. Well, not quite at the end. The last 18 inches is cantilevered. But by putting the legs there, it means that any load on this end actually gets translated to an upward force in the middle of this span where the harbour makes it weaker, and it helps to balance the load better. I've still got one more long narrow section to go in over the top of the DCC cabinet, and then I've got to get the curved corners in. There'll be 16-inch radius curves in this corner and in this corner. And I'm not sure what the radius is here and here. Being only 45 degrees, probably about 24 inches will look about right. But that's all a task for another day. I'm going to go in now. It's already starting to get dark outside. So stay tuned and I will see you tomorrow morning. Here is the last of the harbour sections framed in, or mostly framed anyway. I've still got all the curved corners to do. And I think I'm going to do those before I pull the rest of the wires through. I think it'll be easier. This framing, this diagonal framing out the front, I think is wrong. So I have backed the 2 screws out of here. That way I can cut that off and start again. And I'll just rebuild it in situ. It's easy enough to do. Anyway, there's 5 curved corners to do. There's 1 at the end. There's 2 here. And there's the 2 at that end. I'm going to start with those because I know exactly how those have to go. Those are 16-inch radius curves. They're both complicated by the fact they run through benchwork joints, but that's no big deal. So let me look for some plywood offcuts and get back to work. Well, I now have most of the curved formers in. The one at this end is 10-inch radius, everything else is 16. Those blocks of wood in there are just to allow me to get a clamp at that crazy angle. I haven't got this one or this one. Both the 90-degree curves that split through benchwork joints, I've put 1/2 in, and then once the glue is set, I will come out again, cut the joists off to the right angle, and then finish them. That's the easiest way of doing those. Note that all these corner pieces have to be cut out so I can reach the bolts. That's something that's very easy to forget if you're not careful. Ask me how I know. Anyway, I'm going to go inside now, get some lunch. Zeus is also whining to go out, so I'm going to let him out, and then I'll see you again this afternoon. I have now finished all the framing for the curves. I've got everything neatened up. There's still a few joists that have to be cut down to make way for the harbour basin, but I will do those once I have the sub-roadbed installed, so that I can just use that as a gauge instead of having to guess. I think what I'm going to do next is put away all the tools, have a bit of a clean up, and then finish running all the wires through this new benchwork. So let me do that and I will be right back. Well, here is this corner after a couple more hours work. So much for putting the tools away, because I ended up getting most of them back out again to do the wiring. But I swept up all the sawdust. Actually, I've made a whole lot more mess since then and swept it up again. And a lot of the wires are done. I think I finished routing wires through this frame that I built last week, although most of the wires end here and only about a third of them have been routed through the corner board that I did yesterday. And nothing's hooked up at this end yet. Most of the wires are actually too short now, which is not surprising because I have to take a longer route. But not to worry, I'll use up the pieces. Anyway, it's dark outside. Zeus wants feeding, so I'm going to go in now and I'll see you again tomorrow. I've just realized that I made a mistake when I built this frame. The pier is not supposed to go all the way to the end of benchwork. It's supposed to stop just before the end and allow the water to go around the end of it. So the way to fix that is to cut the end frame down to 1.5 inches, put a spacer in behind it, and then put a full height rib behind that, and then cut the front stringer off accordingly. It won't take long. Let me do that quickly and I will be right back. Well, here it is with the end modified. As I said, it didn't take very long, like less than half an hour, including getting all the tools out that I put away yesterday. So with that done, I can go back to pulling wires through. I think I mentioned last time that a lot of them are now a little bit too short, so I've got to cut new pieces to go from this terminal block back to the control cabinet, and all these short pieces I will probably end up getting used up some other time. Well, today is December 26. I did come out here yesterday, but just for a short time. I managed to get all the wiring re-hooked up. So with all the framing in above the benchwork, in above the workbench, all the wiring has now been run through properly, all hooked up here. And yesterday I ran a train over most of the railroad. Well, I didn't do every track, but I ran into every power district and every section, just to make sure that everything was hooked up correctly. And I didn't have any problems, so that means all the wires are good. Today I am going to start working on tops for the bench work that I've already done, well, mainly the harbour area. This piece here, I cut that a while ago. I did that when I needed a couple of thin strips of 1/2 inch plywood. And rather than put a nearly full sheet back on the stack, I just cut it to size and tacked it into place on this section with 6 screws. Today I'm going to start in this corner. Well, I'm going to screw this one down properly, but I'm also going to get a top in this corner and across here, and probably go all the way around. I'm not planning on doing the area over the DCC cabinet, because once again that will require thin strips, and I'll have those left over as offcuts after I do the main yard. I mentioned in an earlier video that the plywood top for this section of the workbench has to run long. So here is the framing joint, and it goes 10.5 inches onto the other one, so I can avoid problems with the turnouts. And the way I get them to fit snugly is to make this one first, and then I've cut the corner one a little bit oversized, and now I'm just going to get a pencil and draw around the end and cut it again. Well, here it is a few minutes later. This piece with the tools on it has now been cut to size and been tack screwed in place. I've also got a splice plate along here that the other one will rest on. I didn't put anything along that short diagonal because there's going to be switch machines there and I don't want to risk getting in the way of those. But it's only about a 10-inch span, so it doesn't matter. I don't really need any more screws in the middle there, but I wanted a couple here. Actually, I can't put them in on the other board just yet because I've got to make sure that they miss the track locations, because they'll have to be removed for transportation. But I can at least now get this piece installed properly. I've got 3 large pieces that I can get fully screwed off. So let me
get back to work, and I'll see you again soon. Well, that is those 3 sheets properly screwed down all over. I've also rough cut the next piece. There it is in the distance. One with no screws in it, or no sawdust all over it. It's still a little bit oversized. I've got to trim it again, but it's a lot easier to rough cut it first, then put it in place, and then remeasure. Well, I now have this corner piece in, the bit that goes under the stairs, and I've also put the harbour bed in as well. 2 pieces on that section and 2 on that section. Last thing I did was to cut these corners off. I installed it with the corners overhanging and then marked them and then cut them with a jigsaw in situ. I think that's the easiest way of doing it. Well, this morning I have extended the benchwork tops in 3 directions. Got this piece in here for the start of the intermodal and general freight yards. Up in the distance, way in the distance, I have the sub-roadbed for the lead tracks. I've also done the wharf section. I know yesterday I said I wasn't going to do that just yet. I was going to wait for some long, narrow offcuts. But I realized I was getting a lot of 4-foot long offcuts that were wide enough to do it. So I just 2-pieced both the top and the bottom sections. There was no point in saving those offcuts and waiting for some longer ones, since I'll be able to use all the long ones anyway. Well, here is the next section with the tops on. This was a little bit more complicated because I had to hack away some more framing to get the lower level in. This middle tier is part of the Shortline area. It's where the cannery goes, and the wood jetty starts where the drill is and runs off the front of the fascia. Starting about 2 feet in at the back, the 2 routes diverge. The rear section is level, as that is part of the container stacking area. The middle bit between the 2 saw cuts is the main line that starts to rise, and the front part is the short line that starts to drop. I haven't positioned those grades accurately yet. I'll do that when I've got them cut for the next frame. Note, as in everywhere else, everything overlaps just to give me tolerance. I've given myself an extra ½ inch more than I think I need at the top level. The middle piece underlaps it by 1 inch, so that can be moved a little bit either way. And then there's quite a significant overlap between the lower wharf and the water. More than likely that's going to get cut back at least 1 inch, but I don't know exactly until the track is plotted. Well, it's been somewhat slow going because I've had to do a lot of trimming of the joists to get all this sub-roadbed in at the right height. But here is the sub-roadbed completed for all the facilities at Lower Harbour. This end here where the drill is sitting is the gravel industry. Opposite the orange level is the scrap wharf. This long straight section here is where the car float and the yard goes. And this last board is where the cannery goes. Here is the ramp down between the 2 levels. It's only about a 1 inch height difference, so a good portion of that grade is the vertical curves top and bottom. The actual straight portion of the grade is relatively small, and it maxes out at about 2%. Going back now to the other end, this piece of curved sub-roadbed is in approximately the right place for the short line entry track, but I've got to go inside and check it just to make sure. The reason I don't think it's right is that it crosses this benchwork joint right in the middle of the river, implying that the bridge spans the benchwork joint. And I may have done it that way, but I don't think so. So I'm going to go inside and check it. I know the river along here is a lot narrower than the plywood base that I've put in for it, the idea being that it meanders quite a bit, and I want some tolerance. Anyway, let me go inside and check the position of this grade, and I will be right back. Well, I figured out why it didn't look right. I hadn't put enough plywood in for the riverbed, so I've just added a couple of offcuts. They're currently gluing up. The bridge goes where the green pencil is now. And there is the curved sub-roadbed around the back of the stream, river, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, that is a good time for me to go in for lunch, and I'll see you again this afternoon. With the sub-roadbed for the curve in place, the next task is to cut a hole through here for the sub-roadbed for the two-track staging yard. I've already cut that piece out. And yes, I know there's a lot of structure that is gone, but there will be some more put in later because there can be a piece across the top, over the top of the staging yard, but still underneath the grade down to the main harbour. So that will strengthen it again. It's basically just the middle of that joist that's cut out. Although it was a lot easier to cut all the way to the top for now. Anyway, I'm going to have to make another hole to get these wires through, and I think I'm nearly there. Let me get back to work and I'll show you the finished result later. Well, here is the entry for the two-track Shortline staging yard. I made it up out of 2 pieces of plywood because it was a lot easier that way. Turnout goes in there. I've still got to put a piece in the end there. It's not permanently installed yet, but it is in the right place. I actually wasn't sure whether it would go in one piece, so I test fitted that dry just to make sure, but it just about goes in and out in one piece. I can't put the guardrails on the sides and then reinstall it because then it won't go in. So I'll have to put those in after I've got it permanently positioned. Anyway, it's already dark outside. It's time to go in and feed Zeus, so I'm going to continue tomorrow. Well, it is the morning of January 1st, 2025. So Happy New Year to everybody. This morning I have finished the sub-roadbed for the Shortline into the staging yard. At least the start of the staging yard anyway. It ends here. I could add another 3 feet, but I can't get it all the way to the end because this last 7-foot long section is going to be left out until I have finished all the other bench work everywhere else. I decided to add the foam roadbed to this portion before installing it. I felt it'd be a lot easier that way. There was a slight complexity here in that I had to drop half an inch, lose half an inch of elevation to get into staging. That puts that staging yard at the right height for best access and for best structure on the joists as well, because obviously I need 4-inch deep holes cut through the joists. Anyway, the next task is to work out where the mainline roadbed goes, and that'll be a broad radius curve. I think it's around about 4 or 5 foot radius. There's a bridge about where the box of screws is over the top of the Shortline, and then it'll curve around here, large radius curve, and go all the way up the front of this benchwork section in front of the ethanol plant. So I'm going to go inside now, get some numbers for that, and then I'll come back out and continue. Well, here is the alignment of the main line crossing over the bridge here. Obviously it's too low at the moment. 50-inch radius template around there because it's about a 49.5-inch radius curve, so that's close enough. I don't have any sub-roadbed cut at that radius, so I'm just going to build it up out of several short pieces. And I cut this piece 3 inches wide across the bridge, giving me enough tolerance. What I think I'm going to start by doing is getting this high enough to give me enough clearance over the Shortline, and then I'll work my way back from there. Well, I put about 10 feet worth of risers in. They all needed to be exactly 2 inches above the top of the existing frame. I left everything clamped while I waited for some lunch. So they've been clamped long enough now. The glue will be set enough that I can remove them. I had to get a much taller clearance here than I was expecting because the bridge design that I've decided on is a lot deeper than what I thought I was going to use. The result of that is that I'm now ½ inch higher than I thought I was going to be at this point in front of the ethanol plant. So I'm not going to have as much of the harbour branch on a falling grade as I had hoped. The majority of it is going to be in this last 12 to 13 feet. but I can still get down there without exceeding 2%. Now I'm just going to turn the camera off now, get back to work, and I'll see you again later. Well, I've been working at it most of the afternoon, and I have got most of the ramp in. Actually, I'm not sure whether I showed you this end, the curve done in my last clip, so I'll show it to you now. And as I said, I got most of it done. There's still a gap here, and the ramp comes all the way down, and I got the bottom vertical curve in. Have this 1/8 inch step here where I go from the thin roadbed to the thick roadbed. I've got these cantilevers in here to support the tail track for the ethanol yard, but that'll be a task for a different day. I'm going to go in now because my back is killing me. I need to sit down for a bit, and by the time I've had a break, it'll be too late to come back out again. So I'm going to close that gap tomorrow. Well, here is this corner and this side of the room with all the sub-roadbed installed for both the Shortline and the Mainline to the harbour. I've also put the curve in to form the fascia. The bridge goes in here, which is why there's a big gap with no risers. And we have the two opposing grades joining at the mid-level. And all this I've already shown you. I did this a few days ago. Well, that's all for this week. I hope you enjoyed the presentation and found it useful or interesting or both. And I hope to see you back next time, where I will again change tacks and work on framing in the upper level of the peninsula. But until then, thanks for watching and bye for now.